So tonight's discussion or panel discussion is actually part of our monthly drive to stimulate dialogue and continuous learning so that we can apply them in our professions. And our vision for these events is to bring together and build a community that will help shape the built environment in Davao towards sustainability.
So again, welcome everyone. This is the July Talks brought to you by Design Davao Society, entitled Authentic Placemaking, with a hypothesis and a very hopeful hypothesis that results to an ideal public space and a happier community. Okay, so just like what Mark Seng just told us a while ago, it's been very exhausting emotionally as well, the pandemic, not being able to, go out to or go to outside places. And it made us all the more parang wanted to talk about authentic placemaking and really connect it with being more happy or having a better public spaces or happier community. Kasi it's for us something that we can hope for once we fully adjust to the new normal, if there's no chance of going back to the old normal. So it's something like that, and then a lot more. So let me just introduce myself for a bit. I am architect Diana Cabales, but my friends call me Nana. You may call me Nana. I am the founder and the designer storyteller of Dava Design Stories. I am also the co-founder of Design Davao Society. And for this night, for this talk, I will be your host and your moderator. Okay, now let me introduce to you to our main speaker for tonight, which I honestly believe do not need any further introduction. He's a legend. Sir Paulo, what can I say? When I told Baxia that the main speaker for this talk would be Paulo, he asked me, why Paulo? Huh? So back no. Why Paulo? And I said, I wanted to listen and to learn from someone who actually did an authentic placemaking, that actually made an ideal public space and that actually made the community happier. And so that is why no other else but Paulo. I think that would I sana naman no naki-level yung aking introduction sa Gawad CCP para sa Sining in Architecture and Allied Arts awardee from 2015. He is also an urban designer, landscape architect, environmental planner, historian, and a writer, a columnist, and he is the founder and the creative principal designer of PGAA Creative Design, PDAA Group International, the principal designer. And to all my past students listening here, architecture students and architects, fun fact, landscape architect and urban designer Paulo Alcazarin finished a degree in architecture in UP Diliman. Ayun. And he actually finished his major in urban design in National University, Singapore. Sana nabigyan ko ng justice yung aking introduction. And here are our reactors for tonight. Just a quick intro then before I give the floor to Sir Paulo. We have Christine Boycosti. She is the principal architect and urban designer of Avali Urban Designs, based in Singapore, but she also have projects in Davao City because she is a proud Davaoeña. She mastered in urban design in National University of Singapore, just like Paolo did, and she received a professional certificate in design thinking and innovation from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and won, no less, the Best Slingshot Design for Radical Innovation back in 2019. And a fun fact, she is more than just an architect, more than just a very radical and progressive designer. She is, can I say it, the best mom in the world. I want to invite our first reactor, architect Christine Bueco, and our architect and urban designer. She posted this morning a little bit of a promotion for this talk and asked the question, what makes you happy in the city. Tama ba,
Yeah,
Christine?
that's right.
Yes, and it's so interesting. I wanted to join in into the comment section, pero um, I'm gonna wait later because I'm the moderator. So I'm gonna throw you the same question in relation also to how you felt about. I mean, that presentation, that lecture from Paulo was like it was full circle from very specific to very general and then back again to general down to a specific thing to a specific issue. So it's more than just some micro to macro. It was full circle, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
to those people who may not know, Paulo's examples were mostly about Singapore because he stayed and he studied, he stayed, and he worked there for more than a decade, right, Paulo?
Yeah, 12 years.
12 years,
And
exactly.
my own company. I didn't work for anyone except for 2 years seconded to government.
Yeah.
So
See, so
I was recruited from the private sector because of my experience, and they needed someone to act as liaison between URA and STB.
yeah, so that's why I asked architect Christine Boycosi to be the first reactor because she's currently now in Singapore. So I'm gonna throw you your same
Yeah.
question. What makes you happy in the city? And do please react to Paulo's
Yeah.
lecture. Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to give a big hand of applause to Sir Paulo because it was really an affirmation of what urban designer have to really go through, you know. As an architect first, as a practicing architect, I just want to highlight, especially to a lot of architects here, there is the different mindset that we have. Whenever we are given a plot of land, we look at it inward and not looking at it more as a broad strokes as part of the city. As part, there's actually three levels when you look at master planning. You have to look at the regional one, the city as a whole, and then you look at your neighborhood scale. How does it relate to the vicinity area, right? And then you have to look at the block, how you can make interconnections, connectivity. And it was actually very interesting. He highlighted, he mentioned, and I'm very happy that he is actually part of the Ansiang connectivity you saw earlier in his slide because I was just there a week ago. What a coincidence. Because my daughter was walking through Chinatown and we were at the other side. And you know, the problem with Davao City now, because we all looked at it per lot. We don't have the URA, we don't have urban redevelopment plan that looks at it from a macro scale where we can maximize connectivity between areas. So what happens is there's a lot of islands where you have to go all the way around to access a place where in fact you can just cut through directly and will take you less than a minute, but then you have to go like a 5 minute roundabout to get to the other side. So that's what we have. And in fact, in some of my projects, I've been very diligently trying to ask neighborhood plots if we can open up their lot for connectivity. And it's so difficult because the mindset for developers, for property owners is I must just have my own lot. I want to secure it on all four sides with property boundary walls. We don't want to open up maybe for security purposes and you know, just really want to look inwards. So urban design is very difficult to practice because of that kind of mindset. And also as an architect, we developed it as what the client would want us to do to design it and not more on how it will benefit the larger community, right? So that's really one of the big problem. That's why when Paul was talking about all these public spaces, it's somehow really non-existent. Sad to say in Davao, but I've been really working hard with developers to open up and even some areas where we choose not to have property boundary walls. Try to open up and even just a small gate because that's really the reality. Once they have their property, they will bound it with walls.
Mhm.
So we don't have that connectivity there. So then again, the one thing that I also want to highlight is the way we really look at cities as cities for cars, right? Because it's interesting. Kaula also mentioned about Daniel Burnham, who developed Manila with the Grand Avenue. This was actually a modernist approach from the City Beautiful movement. And actually now, years, decades later, a lot of critics to that, because whenever we create these grand avenues, although it's very it promotes civic pride, it promotes grandeur to the city. It's what we want the other, what we want the other places to perceive our town, but the people who live in the town actually doesn't really benefit from it well, because it doesn't speak well to how they use the space. Because when we talk about public spaces, there are actually different levels. So when you ask me what makes me happy, I wouldn't want to necessarily sit on a grand avenue, because I want it to be more intimate. I want it to be more private, maybe just a small corner. And there's actually a recent study in Singapore that they have all these grand public spaces, but why did they find people conversing in interstitial spaces? That means in between spaces of buildings, right? Because it's human nature. Sometimes they want their back to be behind something.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in a grand space, you don't want it to be visually exposed. So sometimes when we design parks, it has to have some backing or some background of trees, so that you feel more secured. When I talk about happiness in a city, there's actually a famous mayor in Bogota, Colombia. His name is
Yes.
Enrique something, right?
The happy
In the
city.
Florida.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you Florida? Yes, yes.
It's actually called the Mayor of Happy.
Yes. The
Yeah, the
book
Mayor of
is
Happy. So it was
titled Happy
interesting.
City.
Yeah, it was very interesting because I read his works, and when I was in MIT, I had so many Colombian classmates, and so I had to really ask them personally. So how did you find his work? Yeah, was it really now a happy city? So they say they still find the car-free zone very annoying, because sometimes they just wish to bring their car, because he actually declared some parts of the city to be totally car-free. So, but that really gave back the city to the people, because city is equivalent to people. Shakespeare once said that the city is the people. So
Yes.
when you look at city, it's not about cars, it's not about buildings, it's about how people you really use the space. And when we talk about being happy in a city, there's always that um, the hedonistic style of about materialism on what you can do in means of materialism, or what you can do in terms of urban form. But there's also the extension of your aspirations, your dreams, being able to extend your potential to the city that you live in. And I think that's really one of the key ingredient of being in a happy city, that you're able to realize your potential, being able to go out there and use the city as an extension of your private house, of your private realm, into a public space. And one item also that Paulo also highlighted is that our public spaces has really been consumed now by private development. And I know this is sad, because private is different, because it's really geared into a more retail kind of space, not the pure civic kind of space. You know, if you notice, some of the public space that we in Davao like to gather or to use is actually the atrium of a big mall. Maybe because it's more convenient and it's more comfortable because it's air conditioned, but also because we don't really have a proper public space where we have
Yes.
avenues of trees and all that. So I think that's what really my takeaway here is, that we have to start building cities that are made for people, not for cars, not even for grand malls that we have acquired now from big cities elsewhere. And we really have the opportunity, because the great advantage really for us is that we don't have to follow the mistakes of big cities that are what they're experiencing around the world now. We can take a different route towards more sustainable urban designs, and we don't have to make the same mistakes. So that's really my takeaway for this session.
Thank you, Christine. It's very passionately said, and then like I really like it. I love how you sort of like prepared, but actually Paulo already nailed all the points that you wanted to share. So you're just parang powering it up. So let me like shift to our next reactor. So it's very interesting. The reason that I actually like really pushed to invite Carla as a reactor, not only that she is a Davaoeña, very familiar with Davao City. I mean, 2 decades of life lived in Davao City, and architecture student for 5 years and all that. But one of the most interesting for me in this mix or of this like set of reactors or this panel is she's actually an urban planner, and she's currently in a development and analysis board, right, Kai? So that's like your main. So it's more about policies, correct? And with the context of and especially the context of Toronto, that it's very different in Philippines, very different in Singapore in some degrees. Being in North America, so very interesting. One thing though that I want to ask Kai, apart from your own reaction from Paula's lecture and probably from architect Christine's recent reaction, is kanina when Paulo was like uh, showing the screen, his screen, there was this park. I forgot to take note of which park that was. Nakita ko yung the design of the benches were actually the concrete benches had like parang barrier. So I felt that there was a bit sense of defensiveness on those benches. And so like I wanted to ask Carla, and of course also Paulo and the rest of the reactors, kasi you've been talking about authenticity, about being ensuring people to be happy in the city and really activating public spaces for people. However, my challenging question is we've been building our public spaces very defensive in many cases, very defensive, and not just like defensive na puro fences or like making that concept in urban design where you make the sittings very uncomfortable because
Very
we don't want
hostile.
the exactly very
Mhm.
hostile. We don't want the beggars to stay there for long and so on and so forth. So that's the thing. We've been talking about authenticity. We've been taking about taking care of our people, but we're also designing in a some degree against the people, especially those who are needs it. So what's your take, Kai? Because you mentioned to me that even to some degree Toronto also has this kind of mentality. So please,
Yeah.
okay.
So I think that dun po papasok yung importance ng public consultation kasi we're designing for the people. So who do we include in public consultations when we talk about when we're designing public spaces, right? So do we only include like politicians? Do we only include people of power, or do we also include like the people who actually use the space, right? So I know that it's like a bigger conversation. It's more like a politics conversation. Are we gonna include people that the homeless population or like yung mga tambay? Are we gonna ask for their opinions when we plan for public spaces? So I think that's a very important thing to consider when we're thinking about public spaces. Kasi who are you including? Who are you excluding? And at the same time, I also what was I gonna say? So it's a bigger conversation. And it requires the coordination of like the government in regards to bylaws and policies. So at the same time, also want to touch on in provision of public spaces, provision of open spaces. Kasi what we do in Toronto, when you develop a land, you actually have to give like at least 5% of a GFA towards open space. So I wonder if that's one thing that Davao can adapt. Again, a conversation with the government. I think Architect Christine and Sir Paolo like already explained it like extensively. So yeah, I'll just keep mine short.
Thank you, guys. So I think how about you, Paulo? I'll just gonna ask you like a bit about that defensive and like what Carla said, hostile designs in our urban furnitures. And of course, naiintindihan ko din naman ang ating LGU kasi they don't want to be liable, they don't want to, they're umiiwas sa ganito ganyan, and the maintenance. And here's one thing. I mean, like for example, how much of a degree of Toronto people or the Toronto population, including the, let's say the poor, including the lower sector, and in Singapore, na nagnanakaw ng parts ng benches. So naiintindihan ko din yung part na yon sa culture ng Filipinos. Ninanakaw natin yung mga bakal ng benches natin, ninanakaw natin yung bakal ng mga signages. So, how do you resolve that? What's your take on that, Paolo?
It's a difficult difficult situation for public spaces, and there are two types of public spaces in the Philippines: the real public ones, which are built and managed by the government, and the privately owned public open space, or POPOs, which you have a lot of these corporate plazas, or in certain cities in the Americas, you are required, or you get additional FAR if you provide all of this. Then they make it very difficult for anyone to stay there or to get to use the space, and that's where they design to turn people off, or it's highly surveilled. They have surveillance so that the homeless. There's a difference though between the problems in U.S. cities versus Canada. In the U.S., it's a lot to do with race. In Canada, it has a lot to do with class. So
Yeah.
both stratified. We have our own type. So all of the, if you're an urban designer or planner and you read all of the books, and you'll notice the differences, and it also can't apply to us, issues of gentrification and stratification, or defensible space, putting those little bars in the seats of public benches so that it prevents homeless people from sleeping. That's almost a default now, and it's asked of us as designers in open space to provide that, so you don't get people sleeping there. I mean, you can sit all you want, but you can't sleep on it. And it's really the level of maturity of the society that provides these open spaces. So it's a long road to fully accessible or fully inclusive design.
Inclusivity, that's the right term. Yes.
It's a matter also of engaging people in the conversation, and that's difficult when you don't speak the same language. As designers, we have our own special language, and we make it difficult for other people to understand what we're saying. So this is where the importance of communication skills comes. I find that having written a popular column where I have to simplify my language so people can understand it is possible up to a certain extent. But what we need to do is also level up the vocabulary of ordinary people, of our general public, to understand concepts that are necessary in engaging in this discourse of public spaces. I mean, if you go to Hong Kong or Singapore and States or people understand what floor area ratios are, what problems of densities are, what the problems of gentrification, because they are acquainted, especially Toronto, with Jane Jacobs, who used to live there, and then all of the language that's vocabulary that's necessary to engage in substantive discourse is there. Ang problema sa atin, we don't, it's not in our conversation, our civics education of our young is not as good as it used to be, so we don't develop the use of that language, because all of our language is catering to K-pop and entertainment rather than to matters of civic importance. So we have to bring civics back.
It's something like Carla said. It's a very, it's a different topic, and it's like every segment from the reactors can actually become a different individual
Yeah.
talks.
But
Di ba? Kasi
yeah,
ang complicated.
the important thing is to start the conversation.
Exactly.
Because if you don't talk about it, then nothing happens, and we're just doing the same thing
Yeah,
over and over again.
I'd like to go back and to what Carla said a while ago, that it's not just only about taking in the people that you want to include, but you also have to take into account the people you will be excluding in a certain plan or in a certain design. And then
Mhm.
Paolo started saying about inclusivity, diba? And so what I don't want to happen in this conversation, or in my future conversations, in our future Design Davao talks, or in anywhere, especially in the academia, na no, we end up negating each other or ourselves, kasi I asked that specifically, that question, because kanina, Paulo said, correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I remember it correctly. You said that we need to build 6 times more than Singapore or Hong Kong ever have done by tomorrow, in order just for us to, like, cope
Yeah,
and
that's
to,
for housing. That's for
for housing
housing.
alone. Yeah, exactly.
Both
So
Singapore and Hong Kong in the last 20, 30 years have built close to 1 million housing units
mhm,
for public housing. And in Singapore, public housing houses close to 90 or some
mhm,
near that percentage of the population. And we've not done the same thing. That's why in all of our towns and cities, the percentage of informal settlers is 20 to 35%,
mhm.
in that range. It's always like that.
Yeah.
And we've never addressed it because the NHA is not doing its job and government is not doing its job.
Three
And
reasons. I know: politics, politics, and politics.
so,
We get it. It's so catchy.
but it's if we address it, it can be addressed, and even I can even say there's money to be made, because all of these informal settlers are paying uh, I'm sorry, the people behind that charge them money
Mhm,
just to be in that
Mhm.
informal area. There is a
mhm.
shadow government that taxes them, and they pay. So there is a capacity to pay, but government doesn't see it fit to provide affordable housing.
Mhm.
And say, like in the aerial picture I showed you of Davao, you will see the informal settlers all along the water. If
Yeah.
you look at the density of those houses, they're at maybe at 1 point something only floor
Mhm.
area ratio. Medium density housing
Okay.
is FAR 3 to 4. You will recover 3/4 of that land and be able to house the same number of people more efficiently and with proper amenities. And you just do the math, because we can do in-site or on-site rehousing, if
Mhm.
only that were part of the agenda, and only if you understood that we need all of these people in the cities, because it's the people that provide the labor force. The
Exactly.
work capital is really, this all of the people in the city contribute to the city's economy. Again, that's what
Exactly.
Jane Jacobs would say.
Mhm.
And but we fail to provide the housing or opportunities for housing.
It's not
If
it's not even just the housing, because if you go to the informal economy, you will see that none of our designers, or sorry, not designers, but whoever responsible or whoever accountable, does not even take into account the properties, not that they own it, but the cultural rights of our informal economy, such as our street vendors, that is so much part of our culture. Okay, before I start into a full on rant, thank you for clarifying that one, Paolo. I really wanted to, ask that 6 times more to build by tomorrow, as much as SG and HK, because what I want to challenge though is sometimes, kasi when designers like us, planners like architects like us, as you mentioned, we have our special or very technical language. What I really don't like, and I also am seeing this now from non-designers, na parang this mentality of just comparing to neighbor cities. I wanted to challenge that. I wanted to ask that, how much can we really compare? I am a very, I am a, I love to travel. because I want to be immersed in cultures. And one of my favorite cities of all time is really Singapore. But I always ask myself, and I always challenge myself, how much should I compare? Kasi Singapore, for one, only has like like less than 6 million population, correct? At si Architect Christine, right? You're muted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
5.6, around
Five
5.6.
point
yeah, only 3 million
exactly.
are
So
real
that's just like
Singaporeans. The rest are expats,
exactly. So
Filipinos.
it's so hard to like really compare how. So I don't want to be stuck in that culture wherein we always, take envy and take comparison and rant about our leaders here. What I want to really suggest and what Design Davao Society really is to ask the right questions, to start asking the right questions, and instead of ranting and just blurting out mistakes, actually try to contribute in giving out solutions. So this is probably why I'm asking this. So now I'm gonna turn over to Buck because there's this one thing that you said, Paolo, about inclusivity and architect Christine Boyko about saying about being making people happy, ensuring people's happiness, and not just happiness, but in fact the aspiration of a person. So that deep na, 'di ba? Parang nasa tuktok na ng Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? One of the things kasi that Buck always challenged me as a designer, he is by the way my one of my design mentors, is usability ng how are you able to ensure that this space, this public space, whether bigger scale, smaller scale, that's what he call it, what you call it, design, tawag dun, na talagang gagamitin siya ng tao, kumbaga, that you're able to like verify and to justify that people will actually use this, right? So like for example, sige daw, like Buck, tell us about first reaction on Paolo's talk and that like inclusivity issue. The one that Carla mentioned about you do not only have to consider the people you want to take part in, but also the people that you will exclude. Sige, go. Buck is
Good job,
frozen.
Nana, for moderating. Anyway, yeah, it was a very enriching talk with Paolo, with the comprehensive education. It is very crucial to really know. That's a very good thing about talks about knowing the history, what you're coming from, and then you move forward from what we've learned.
Buck, can I interrupt a bit?
Go ahead. You
My
can
my
interrupt.
oh, my very personal moderator, Duncan, our core member, actually found the right word. It's validation. That's the right word I was looking for. Design validation. How do you validate that your design, that your plan, whatever the size, will be actually used? Especially we're talking about public spaces. That's it. Design validation. Thanks, Kin. Okay, Buck.
Yeah, this was a 3-hour messenger conversation among Duncan, Nana, and Neil for validation. We had a validation exercise that we wanted to talk about. Before we do that, there's this thing about what you basically mentioned in terms of like the public space, that it's very defensive. I think there's two things. There's defensible and defensive. So there's the defensible where you'll be able to be safe, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to have people design. It is designed for people to see, people to be safe, right? But the defensive side, and you pointed it out, is you said, it really caught me in what you said, Nana, that because probably the public works or the government agency will not be held liable, but they should be liable. They should be accountable. And that should be a qualitative, that should be a characteristic for everyone in our profession to be accountable. That's something I love to really challenge even in my team, that accountability is very crucial. And that has to start with us, has to start with our companies, it has to start with us. And that's the only way for us to really, improve that state, that culture that we have, that I believe Filipino culture is still very beautiful. Okay. one thing that you mentioned about validation is actually goes back to what Carla said. Public consultation is actually validation. So what we have to learn as designers is asking the right questions. And I want to segue this later on. So I want to ask this as well to Paolo. But it is very crucial to ask the right questions, really know your knowledge, really be unassuming, and you have to be less presumptive that you know everything, despite a 5-year education plus a 2-year internship plus a 1-year board exam plus a few more years. It's not like that. There's so much more that we can do. So there has to be that empathy, and I believe design thinking. You see, no? Design thinking is very that in terms of empathy. So that
Unmute.
so that's basically what you really have to talk about in terms of validation. You see it in architecture, you see it in public space, you see it in what Paolo has done remarkably in Iloilo and also in Makati. If I walk, of course, the last time I walked in Makati, Paolo, was Q1 of 2020. You enjoy the place, enjoy walking much more. You see the action. Okay, so there's really a quality of what you see of the space, and that's where you make happy when you really feel there is a certain elevation and certain connectivity with people. Okay, I wanna segue this if you don't mind, Nana.
Yeah, go.
For 1 second.
Yeah, I think you should fix your connection box. It's very unstable. Am I the only one getting a very unstable?
Yeah, it's quite
Yeah,
choppy.
Yeah,
I'm the one.
he's a bit choppy.
yeah, you're choppy. So fix it because we don't
Can
want to
you hear
miss
me
that.
now?
Fix it. We don't want to miss.
Maybe turn off the video.
Yeah, maybe
Might help.
for a while, for a bit. Okay, so while we're waiting for Bak, it's very interesting kasi nagpa-pop yung mga conversations sa chat, nakakatawa. Neil Bershabe says, sana may sana may nanunood na government official. I wish some government people
Yeah.
are watching. Tapos biglang,
I think we need to do a better job next time of inviting from the private sector and also the government. But sige lang, we'll work on it. This is our second talk, but I hope we can improve on that.
elect.
I'm back. Am I okay?
Okay, your
Am I-
Bak is back. Yeah, we can hear you. Sige daw, kanta ka daw ng one line if stable na ba?
I'm the unstable one. It's not my fault. It's the.
Yeah, of course, nobody's blaming you. Bitaw Bak. Para we don't wanna miss ba? Naka-TV kasi yan siya
I'd like
ngayon.
to. It really catches me how. It's not that. It really catches me how Paolo infiltrated, encouraged and collaborated with the public sector, and it's a very beautiful thing because as an architect, I don't do that much. It's really more private. It's very private. Okay, and one thing I like to a lot of the colleagues is really
Yeah, Bob,
you know how
you're
to
so choppy. Okay, let's give Buck a bit to fix whatever's happening in Cebu. Andyan kasi si Mayor Sara sa Cebu ngayon eh, so baka may nangyayari dyan. So I read the news today, so I know I'm updated. Anyway, so before we go back to Buck, let's read some of the questions sa chat. Okay, or better yet, let's invite the people who posted questions to unmute themselves, show your beautiful faces, and say hi and ask the question. Mikey Ramos, a good friend of mine too. Sige, Mikey, sumali ka na. Where's Mikey? Bak, usab na lang kaunya ha, if stable na net.
No problem.
All right, go. Hi, Mikey. You have a question?
Hi.
Hi.
So I think Paolo answered it interestingly. How he convinced Iloilo LG to adopt the good practices
So-
for design.
Kasi not all can read the chat. Some are watching live on Facebook, and we will be airing this on YT as well. So Mike is asking, how did Paolo convince the Iloilo government? And it's not solely was it solely a government project, Paolo, or was it a quasi development with private sector?
No,
Can you give us a
it's
bit?
all government.
Okay.
Makati is mostly private. That's Masaya.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is dependent on the situation. Iloilo, because Senator Drilon was on the same page as Mayor Treñas, and roughly on the same page as the provincial governor. So it's a unity
So
of
the stars aligned for that
yes,
project.
it's a unity of political will, which is impossible in Metro Manila because there are 17 political wills in Metro Manila. So impossible. Because once you cross the boundary, all the rules change. You have to deal with, despite the fact that there's an MMDA, which does nothing but collect garbage and manage traffic. So I need to make mention of one insight in the immensity of the problem, or the comparison of cities to, say, Singapore, which is also a city-state,
Yes.
is population. And I was saying that Manila is 12 point something million, but everybody else is 2 or 3 million or less. I mean, Metro Cebu at 3. The solutions are more solvable in any city past Metro Cebu, because then you go down to 2 million and less. For Davao, it's just 1 point. Somewhere close to 2 million if you include the surrounding areas. So in terms of population, it's a lot of the issues or challenges are more solvable in every other city except the biggest metro. That's why the secondary cities and the tertiary cities are the cities where you can solve things before they get out of hand. Unfortunately, when we are approached by some of the LGUs, the first thing they say is, we want to be like Manila, which is wrong. We want to build a BGC, which is impossible. I just saw a picture of Dumaguete's news press release showing several high rises like Singapore, including Marina Sands in their perspective for the new Dumaguete. And it's impossible because it's just a pipe dream, and you're just trying to fool people, and these are really unachievable.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I think Paulo, there was this time, if I remember, I cannot pinpoint names of designers or names of cities, but I noticed that there was this parang movement before, and it is still, it's still present till today, that we have this mentality of cookie cutter in terms of designing cities, in terms of designing neighborhoods. Like, I mean, how do you draw the line? Since you mentioned that, how do you draw the line na when is it a model city to be a prototype and be copied, versus no, it shouldn't be cookie cutter? Because when I went to Singapore, there are towns there that are very like different from each other in terms of identity. Like when you go to Chinatown, it's so different when you go to nearby the river bank in the city hall area in the old Chinatown, and whereas you go to other places. But so I'm very curious, since you talked about that. How do you like draw the line? When do you really copy? Kasi you told me na Iloilo now is being copied by other
well, it's a scale. The scale of copying is, the Esplanade is easy to copy. I mean, it's not. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand how you can design a good Esplanade, but a pedestrian or circulation system is something you can't copy. Everything is site specific. You need to understand the basics of how systems work, and need to also understand how to analyze data, or how to get the data required to be able to produce a solution. So this is where academe comes in, and urbanism, the study of urbanism in the Philippines, specific to Philippine towns and cities, still has a long way to go. the reason Singapore has improved in the way it's built the city is that it goes back and studies what it did before to learn the lessons. Their housing HDB has sociologists in their plantilla, and they analyze how people have reacted and used the spaces. And this is sociological. This is Brenda Yo and all of these people who study. They have urban sociologists and urban anthropologists to advise them on how to better tweak the next series of designs. And so they learn this iterative process of figuring out the development plans has led to improvements on the template. So it's not cookie cutter. You start with something, you have to start with something. And so we need to understand that first in academe, we have to start studying Philippine towns and cities. See what the effects are of these templates that we had copied from overseas have affected our lives, how sprawl has affected our lives, how subdivisions have affected our lives, how industrial parks have, and then to generate a body of knowledge which can then be filtered down to the practitioners like ourselves, who then will be able to understand the reasons why things work or don't work. And then in our own personal practice, often we don't go back to what we did before. And in terms of more complex projects, do post-occupancy evaluations, which is standard, say, in the UK government and to a certain extent in Singapore, to analyze architecture and spaces, as well as also in other cities, analyze how parks are work or don't work. So so the onus really is on academe to create that base of knowledge, for us practitioners to go back to academe and transmit what we've learned, and then allow the scholars to study our type of urbanism, so we can evolve our own type of urbanism and find something that works. Because you can't translate you can't build a Singapore here and help to make it work. We are not a socialist country. We don't own all the land. Singapore owns all of the land. Because they passed a law that allowed them to consolidate all the land and control it. Same in Hong Kong. They control the land and release it for development. The release of plots in Hong Kong and Singapore is a system that works and allows for everybody to make money on the private side, as well as give government the enough control over development densities and directions, so that public infrastructure is provided before the development gets there. Here it's the other way around. It's neoliberal low-hanging fruit. You just develop where it's cheapest land, and then bahala na, the government then will spend 1 trillion to build the skyways to connect without mass transport. So we're digging our own graves in trying to
oh my God, yes, that's so correct.
develop the way other countries have seen it unfit to develop, which is essentially sprawl. And we still are selling it, including skyways and a lot of the big ticket items. I mean, you can quote me, because because a lot of the things that we're doing is really misdirected, and we're not prioritizing the things we should prioritize, again based on standards that are actually already 20 or 30 years old in other countries, because it's easy to do. It's easy to build a superhighway or a skyway. It's easy to buy, easier to borrow 10 trillion than it is to spend 30 million pesos to provide a pedestrian bridge over a river. So it's really common sense, except that in the Philippines, common sense is not common.
You know what, Paulo? You just made this very difficult for me as a moderator. I thought that my job would be moderating the four of you, but now my job is moderating myself, because you have so many trigger points there, especially that part. Carla was also like, I know she's triggered. We constantly talk about these things. Like when you said about here, we just like take out the cheapest land, kahit alam nating babahiin yan. we build there. Alam nating babahian yan.
We fill it up because it's usually below the level that floods. So then when you fill, it floods in our neighbors and the drainage system. And essentially, a lot of the areas that we have for sprawl is prime agriculture, primary production area, which is it's not the tenets of design with nature point to settlements not in the highest productivity areas for agriculture. That's why our carbon footprint is so big. It's because we have to bring our food from so much farther away. Something
Oh,
we
yes.
realize
Oh.
now in the post. Before I forget, something at the start which Christine had brought up, which is the connectivity. A fellow alumni of ours, Leo Poco, has a very good system because he studied space syntax in the UK, and this is a way to get good analysis and data from systems of connectivity and allows us to question the way we're building our streets and our enclaves, which does not allow for connectivity. So an open city that has a lot of connecting points is much better than, of course, enclaving everything, and then you travel 3 kilometers just to get out of your village when, in fact, the place you're going to is just 100 meters away. So but it's a very complicated issue in our situation because of problems of security, the problems of inclusivity or exclusivity, the fact that our political frameworks don't jive with physical frameworks. Barangay will encompass an informal settlement, and the formal settlements, you have all of the points of friction. Again, the most interesting reading I've had, especially in this last year of COVID, is to read a lot of the work of urban sociologists from the UP and Ateneo, who interrogate all of what we've done in terms of urban development in the last 20, 30 years. A lot of them critiques of neoliberalism and the way Filipinos' lives are affected by the way we put our quote unquote communities together. And so as physical designers, architects, landscape architects, planners, what we lack is connections to all of the very good groundwork that urban sociologists have done and geographers. So I find the most interesting questions being asked by current Philippine studies in geography and urban sociology, except for the fact that they themselves don't also understand completely how we do things in physical design. So I find that my most interesting conversations are with geographers and sociologists, because they ask the right questions, except that they need help also on the aspect of physical realities of how things are actually built. So they make certain assumptions, and we make certain assumptions of the sociology of our cities. They can answer our questions, except we don't ask the questions because we're always on default mode when a client comes to us. So design us a shopping center, or design us a big box mall, when nobody builds big box malls anymore. So I think we have to get away from this mindset of laziness, because it's actually easier to do if you just follow what the client wants. The client's influenced by thinking of 20 or 30 years ago, because his marketing people are thinking is 20, 30 years ago. Because the marketers tell people you have to sell, the only thing that will sell is a single detached unit in a single lot far out there in the boondocks. Which is exo-urbanism, and you spend 3 hours to commute. Don't worry, it will sell, because that's the aspiration that we have been selling Filipinos: house and lot, house and lot. There's our definition of property has always been house and lot, but because we are 110 million Filipinos, mostly in urban areas, that is totally unachievable. You have to spread all of these house and lots over the entire Philippines to be able to achieve the goal of that false dream of a house and lot. If you want to remain urban, if you don't want to control your population or manage it because we are a Catholic country, that's the elephant in the room, diba? Then you redefine everything, or you stay just keep on doing what you do, and we'll all forever suffer and at the end eventually die because of what we're doing. Sorry,
Oh my God.
that's a positive outlook, huh? That's a positive outlook.
I really, no one can interrupt that. I mean, not, no one could, because thank you for that. And there's so much trigger points. So I think Carla's raising his hands before raising her hand, before I turn over back to Buck. Kasi na-interrupt siya kanina about the design validation and what he was saying about the design thinking. Before I turn it over to Buck, Kai, ask your question to Paolo, I believe. Or your reaction, or
Oh, I just want to quickly circle back to your question about like how do we avoid like putting cookie cutter designs. I think to build on what Sir Paolo said, I think it's also important to have public consultation because every place is different. So the people in each places would be different, so they would have like different insights on what design would be. So again, it's also very important to like ask for their opinions or for their insights to avoid, you know, kasi, yeah.
Yeah, can I circle back to that question, to that like reaction? Kasi like a lot from Sir Paolo said a while ago that we have a very different mentality here, right? And it is no brainer to say for us designers especially, na it's not just that there's this gap talaga between the design thinking of designers, which is even that is questionable, versus, you know, the general public. Now, the thing kasi with public consultation na very difficult to do is how do you really measure, you know, like the value or the inputs of these people when they themselves are not as educated with what, not that they're non-educated, but in terms of like design ideology. So how do you resolve that? Yes, Paolo.
They don't.
Yes,
They
Christine.
don't
Oh,
speak,
okay. Everybody's
they don't speak the same language.
exactly.
So it's-
That's exactly that thing, and not just that. I know you said a while ago that, you know, the most crucial thing here is to really do something about our communication skills, because we are designing for people, not for designers. We're designing for people, not for corporations. We're designing for people, not for the government officials, right? So how do we ensure the quality of data or you know, information that we get from the public consultation? I'm not, yes, Christine.
Yeah, I just have some nuggets on that because I think there's really this. I have one professor back when I was doing my urban design at NUS, right? And we have, as a designer, it's very different when you are an architect as an urban designer. Urban designer, I would like to think more as a mediator of various disciplines. City is very complex to be designed by a designer. It is designed by a very wide multi-disciplines. It's multimodal, multidisciplines. So there's really not one perfect design. So, and neither should a designer design a city actually. So, for me, it's really putting all the people together
Paolo's
here
reacting.
at,
Paolo's reacting.
yeah, in
I agree. I
URA,
agree.
in URA, actually, when you ask what people think, we don't actually have to say the same language personally for me because city is an extension of yourself. It's not like a project, an architecture project where it is very definitive, right? I want this to be iconic. I want this. But city is made of various complex people with different needs,
And
aspirations, different dreams. So it's very impossible to design for that. So the most that urban design is actually to give a canvas where people are able to express themselves. And in URA here, they did something where they opened up the ground floor and people can just come in and write down all their aspirations, thousands and thousands.
Wow.
Even through online, and that's what the city of Boston did as well. They set up a crowdsourcing application where you can just straight away just extend what you think of a city and all that, because there's this actually famous picture of Le Corbusier during the modernist in the 1900s, right? When there's a picture of him doing like this.
Yeah. Let's not revive the ghost of Siam.
Yeah, the ghost of Le Corbusier.
Oh no, of the
That's
modernists.
Box Hero, by
No,
the
no,
way.
Oh,
no.
That's
yeah, yeah.
Box
No,
Hero.
no, he's really a hero in architecture. But what I'm saying is, there's really, this is what personally I felt, that there's really a big gap on the frame of mind of an architect, because personally I had to also get out from it, get out from that kind of mindset that we have, that we could actually really design a city. It's very complex,
I-
and the more stakeholders are involved, and we actually did this at MIT, where we list down the stakeholders of a city, because initially we thought it's the users, it's the government, it's the developer, it's whatever stakeholders. But actually, when we really went down into detail, there's 100 stakeholders in a city, so it's quite impossible, right? So I think, like what Paolo mentioned, the work of sociologists. Recently, a psychologist, a Stanford professor, said that he's actually the only psychologist that was awarded the Nobel Prize for economics, because he found out, when he asked all the people to do that crowdsourcing, he did an analysis. How do you find out what really makes people unhappy? So he did the opposite. What makes people unhappy in a city? And when they break it down step by step, when you wake up in the morning, and they found out it's actually commuting to work.
Oh God.
So that's the
Kai?
most, yeah, that's the most unhappiest part of their day, when they always commute, right? And this goes back again to making city less more for cars, but make it more as an experience. You can probably cycle, walk into multimodal ways of, living in a city. So in terms of cookie cutter, is this where, like Paulo shared with us, it's very important to dig up the history of a city, how people have evolved and used the city over times, because of course we can't stick all the time to the history, to the past. We have to look at it as it progressed, and adapt to how it is being used in the present.
Mhm.
And really digging up morphological, because I also did a study on the morphology of Davao. When Carlos showed that picture, there's actually two main intersections of avenues right in the middle. There's Rojas there. The reason for that intersection is because we have the San Pedro Church, right, at the delta
Yes.
of the Davao River. And and at the other side, when the Chinese were starting to bring in, using Santa Ana Wharf at the other side, so that's where the Chinese community now, they
Yes,
had the
Chinatown.
Santa Ana Wharf there. They had the Santa Ana Wharf there, and so they wanted to bring that into the city as well. So that's why you had that radial form, one coming from Main Avenue, coming from the Santa Ana Wharf, and one coming from the San Pedro
Yes.
area. Yeah, so digging up all this morphological assessment of the city uncovers a lot of historical value. When we talk about landmarks, for example, it's not all about statues and sculptures. I would like to highlight that, for example, Bangkerohan River can be considered as a landmark because it has been there since memorial time. Aldo Rossi once said that, for us to be able to go through the different stages of the city, there must always be something that should be kept as part of the good of our memories. So we can be able to navigate forward, right? There's always that past that we have to lean on to move forward. So landmarks should also be spaces that have survived the test of times, like marketplaces, so it's not all about statues as well. So
Streets actually,
yeah,
architect
really preserving those
streets.
areas, spaces, especially like for example in Davao, I've uncovered that spaces for the minorities, like for the Lumads, the Muslims, we don't really give that inclusivity of a social space, right on our city parks, for example, the historical value for that. So that's one way of making inclusive city, and I think those are also part of the stakeholders in the city where their opinions also matter, so they feel part of the city making. When we talk about accountability, right, it's accountability where um, you have a sense of identity in the city. When you talk about accountability, you feel that you are part of the city. And how do you become a part of the city? It's because when you have, you identify, there's some identity of you in the city. And I think that's part of the conversation that we also have to talk about.
Thank you, Buck. Cheers. He has a lot of wine there beside him, I know. And his connection is back. But Buck, sorry, last one yun. I know Sir Paulo's been reacting to something that Christine was saying. Just a quick roundabout. Anything to add before I turn it over to Buck?
Who, me?
Me?
Paulo, yes.
Oh no,
You've been reacting.
I think we have to set the difference between designing and planning. I mean, participatory planning is good, and the general public has a lot to contribute to the conversation to plan
I
a
think that's what
city.
Carla's been telling since
Yes,
kanina.
but urban designers and physical designers actually design. You need to design things that take a physical reality. So when we design an esplanade, there are thousand elements to put together to create that esplanade. That's real design. It's physical design. It's different from conceptual design or planning, which is a direction that we need to take. This is where all of the aspirations and the wants and needs, and this will make me happy, and that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we abandon. The danger is that we abandon and just disregard the necessity for skill and expertise in urban design and physical design. It's really needed, because I get into stakeholder conversations and they have 1,000 things they want, but they don't realize that the realities of budget and actual construction limit the eventual physical reality. And this is where we as physical designers, architects, landscape architects, urban designers, this is the role we play in stakeholder meetings or participatory designs by way of charrettes, to assist people in giving design direction. But you are the anchor to what you are, the reality check. Okay po yan,
Yes.
kaya yan, pwede natin gawin yan, pero ito ho yung problema niyan. Masyadong mahal,
Yes,
hindi
like
natin
what you
magagawa.
mentioned, like what you mentioned kanina, na it's also about the functionality, the engineering of it, and not just the.
Yeah. So the reason they call you, the reason you're a consultant, is they consult you because you know what can and cannot be done. You understand what their wants and needs are, and you need to be able to translate it into physical reality. I get a lot of this dichotomy of concept of planning versus design,
Yes.
and those planners who can't design are saying, oh, that's not necessary, anybody can do it. An engineer can do it. So you have to be trained. Urban design is discipline. That's why we study places. That's why we go from city to city and see what other people have actually put on the ground. Because
you know what, Paolo, I will even say urban design is a gift. I'm sorry, not everyone can do it.
it can be learned. I learned it. It has to be learned.
Everything is developed.
But what Christine says is right. I mean, everyone has to participate.
Exactly.
But it's our role to act as the conduit from dream to reality. Otherwise, why have we trained ourselves at all? Then we'll just input everything. It becomes an algorithm, and a 3D printer will create reality for us. Eventually, that may happen, but the AI has to learn the algorithm from us.
I really like how Christine ended with that you are designing for people, and that actually the people is actually the city, itself. They are the city itself. And it
Yes.
really reminded me of what Winston Churchill said. You design
Yeah.
your environment,
And
and in return, it
it
decides,
shapes us.
it
But I
shapes
must
us.
I must take a little countenance to the that we don't need formal spaces, that we don't
Mhm.
need places of grandeur.
Exactly.
There must be a balance of formal and informal, and it's important to have symbols of country and symbols of unity and symbols of democracy.
Exactly. Yes.
If we don't have those symbols, everything is an informal settlement. Then we have no heart, no center, no goal. I don't
Yes.
mean that we create a Albert Speer like Grand Avenue towards a capital that's 3 times the size of the U.S. capital, but we still need a capital. We still need a center of government, because that center of government is where we all go to for all of
It's
our
symbolic
needs.
also. It's
It's
also symbolic.
it's symbolic, but it's also real. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at Manila, the problem of us in democracy to express our resistance to what all the kalokohan that our officials are doing is the fact that it's impossible to demonstrate against the senators, the congressman, and the president, because they are separated in 3 separate isolated areas in the Philippines. If they were all in one, like Washington, D.C., you can have a 1,000,000-man march and then make yourself felt. Not so in Metro Manila. You have to go to
Archipelago.
Congress in Novaliches, then you have to hire all the buses to take you to the Senate in beside the
Mm-hmm.
CCP. And then you can't approach Malacanang at all because you're secluded by the river. So we don't have real democratic spaces. And this is the reason for these formal spaces, because it doesn't represent the politicians, it represents us. If we don't have that space where we can shout against the government
Demonstrate.
and
Mhm.
demonstrate and make ourselves felt, then we do not have a voice. Our voice must have a physical presence. I mean, we can do it digitally, but it's not the same as having. And we then, if our politicians are in one place, then they will feel our presence and not be able to hide. And that's what they're
Mhm.
doing now. They hide. Why do you think mayors set new city halls outside? And they try to take themselves away from physical presence of their constituents, and that's
Mhm.
wrong. They have to
This
be
is.
accountable, not just
Uh-huh.
in principle, but in physical reality.
Mhm.
You have to be approachable. I'm sorry, that's my personal view.
It's okay. It's okay. But I hate to interrupt. I want to listen to you all day, but that's my key
Well,
point to turn over to. That's my key point to turn over to Buck. And also that
Right.
reminded me a question from Jessie. Jessie, can you unmute and show your, because it's very interesting. Paulo was talking about the Metro Manila and the political the government buildings. I think it's a bit related to what Jesse's asking. Is Jessie still here?
What's
Yes,
he
yes.
asking?
Yeah. Hi, Jessie.
Hello, hello.
Ayan, so can you ask Sir Paulo yourself?
Sir Paulo, given the situation of Manila, like the transfer of capital from Manila to Quezon City, so
You're
that's why
going to ask me about Clark.
yes, that's why. Given the situation of one, is Clark a good idea or is it dangerous?
Ridiculous. It's a backup capital. I'll say that at
Yes.
most.
So that's kind of what you want
How
to say.
we have to learn the lessons of all of the other countries that have tried to
Yes.
put up capitals elsewhere.
So we're making a
Malaysia, Putrajaya
giant.
No, no, Sir
they were,
Paulo, I'm gonna echo it lang. I'm gonna echo with this question kasi I've heard, I don't know, I think I hope that idea is abandoned. And I'm not very sure. I will put a disclaimer, but I've heard before that Davao City actually considered of relocating the capital because San Pedro is very small na, and something like this. And this is also I noticed in Davao City. We do not have that one, like yung sinasabi nyo kanina, the connectivity. It's not just about the neighborhood. Also, we do not have a university belt here. We do not have like one capital government agencies na andyan silang lahat.
Yeah.
Cross ka lang. Everything nasa barangay ganito si ganyang agency, si barangay ganitong ganyang agency.
Yeah,
So
Davao is
Yeah,
difficult
very
situation.
scattered, and we're very big. I'm not against Davao here. It's just, it grew like a mushroom, and then ayan na. Now I've heard before that they had plans in considering of relocating. Now I really like that Jesse, asked this question, kasi can Davao or other cities in the country do the same? Will it work? It's a good question for me.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If we talk Metro Manila and try to move the capital to Clark, there are so many problems there.
Transportation.
Well, the reason that Putrajaya was able to be done and Brasilia was able to be done because both countries are petrol rich. So it was petrol money that funded Putrajaya and Brasilia, and Canberra is Australia is a rich state. We don't have the money.
Canberra, yeah.
We don't have,
Don't have the money.
Clark is, let me tell you, Clark is just a real estate play. It's just development for corporate purposes. And that's what it is. And we have to acknowledge that. I mean, it is a good backup. It makes sense to have a backup for all of the data that is required by government. So those backup offices, it's fine, it's logical. But to move into a place with no history, you're abandoning the capital of the Philippines for 450 years, where all of our creative production is, all of our culture is. You cannot build something from Canberra. Took 50 years to even mature to a certain. Putrajaya is half empty all the time, and it's ridiculous because you have to take a bus to everywhere. I know those people. I know some of the planners, and they admit it's really it's hubris. It's feeling they have so much money they can do anything they want. So that's why Mahathir. That's Mahathir's pet toy. And we don't have the luxury.
There's only not 3 reasons. There's 6 reasons. Politics, business, and business. 6 reasons.
Besides, if you extend the saying that the greenest building is the one that's already standing, the greenest city is the one that's already there. To build
that's
from
very
scratch,
anti-tabula rasa. I like that.
Yeah, to build from scratch is that what are you eliminating? They should bring back Clark to agriculture, give it back to the IPs. I'm just saying, because it's easier to do actually a Clark, and that's why AECOM and all of those foreign planners are having such a grand time. It's because it's tabula rasa and they can do what they want. They play around with all of this fancy thing. I'm sorry, I'm also involved with Clark doing the Central Park, but it's more difficult to take a complicated problem like Metro Manila and try to fix it. But we have to. Otherwise, if we can't fix Manila, we can't fix anything else in the Philippines.
Okay.
We have to challenge ourselves, and I think that Filipino designers, architects, landscape architects, urban designers, we are up to the task. If we believe we can do it and apply ourselves, then we can do it. But we have to sit down and talk to each other and talk to the social scientists and talk to the people and
Sir
help
Paulo?
them. Yeah.
One of my friends just told me that his brain is already fried. So I want to check on our participants. If you are still listening, if you are still alive, can you please type yes if you want to clone Paulo Alcazarin to 100 more Paulo Alcazarin for the next.
It doesn't mean there are other people who think the same way.
Yes,
it's just that
yes.
we don't have
yes.
It's just that's why I said yes to this invitation.
Should Paulo Alcazarin run for 2022?
No, I already have a party list.
Anyway, sige, let's wrap it up because it's already almost 10 p.m. Buck, it's your turn. Cheers again. My coffee is now empty and I can still see your wine pouring. Buck, let's go back a bit to design validation to full circle the conversation.
Well, design validation was answered by Christine. That was definitely it. What you basically have, you should not stop in terms of the first question, and the answer will just be there, and you think literally that the person that's saying that's basically what you're gonna give. So that's something we have to really learn as a profession, as professionals, to really learn the skill validation. So of course, when you had that, all these walls in the ground floor or in Boston, these were all a number of aspirations that still really boil down to a few number of ideas. It really still goes back to a few number of the essence of a city or the essence of living.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say city, the essence of what living probably for us, for people. So that's basically it. It was very nicely said. I love being a listener right now.
Oh, it's hard to believe, Bob. It's
Yeah.
hard to believe.
And then I agree with Paulo as well that shouldn't be an opt-out. Why? We do new cities because we can't fix the other cities. And I really cannot take it when we have all these reclamation projects all over the Philippines.
Ako, lagot ka kay William T.
I know. But damn, I cannot think of these
Oh my
things.
God, natatakot na ako sa talk na to.
Then you have
No, he's a friend, I can say that.
yeah, he's a friend. I mean,
Hi, William. We're
we have
Facebook
all
friends.
these,
I hope he's
it's
watching.
beautiful to be critical as well. It is very beautiful to be critical. I mean, that's the beauty that we should all develop as an industry. So as you also mentioned, like you said, 6 things. You have the politics and the business, and sometimes I would still say yes. The private will always be business oriented because it is private profit centered. But what's very and this is probably where Paolo would probably stand on with me as well, that where is the drawing the line of public and private, right? So why is public sector thinking about private, about profiting over land, right, Paolo?
No, well, I can
Yeah.
just quote. I'll quote Marx and say, "All property is theft."
Yeah, exactly. So they're modeling where it is based on private. I mean, they're modeling the Makati. Your basic example was Makati, right? They're modeling. They made it this way. Let's do it this way. But at the end of the day, public sector is designing policy so that private will be able to ensure the livability as well. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not. Yeah, right. So that's a very long process for everyone, guys. Even in Cebu, in Davao, it's a very heavy-handed conversation.
I think I know my concluding question now. But Paulo, you're saying something.
But it's important.
that's
It's important.
basically
Buck is right. I mean, you have to ask the questions, and you have to understand the problem. Private versus public is a battle also in this recurring discussions by public administration people. Public ad, the way you govern, especially cities and towns, the frameworks that we have currently don't work, and we have to rethink them because we need to find new ways of governance that is more inclusive, and it's more transparent, it's more efficient. We have to rethink the way we run our cities with the Sanggunians because the members are actually those that have their vested interest, and they make the stakeholders. If you go through the CLUP process, the stakeholder bodies involve a lot of them, and the representation is not always very good. So although on paper the CLUP 12-step CLUP process, comprehensive land use plan process, is good, and you have stakeholders for 5 stages, you don't consult everyone, so not everyone has a voice in reality, and oftentimes it's manned by the same people in the same committees pushing their own agenda. So we have to understand, and people have to be empowered to understand that their lives are being manipulated by those with agendas that are purely selfish. And this consciousness is not there yet, and we have to, because we are all hard pressed to earn a living. So that's the reason why we can't engage. But the future is in our young, and once the young understand this, they have the energy. We're already in our waning years.
Yeah,
so,
but I still think there should be a Paulo Alcazarin 100 clones to
No.
ensure that future.
No, I think I've done 30 webinars since the lockdown. I'm
Pagod na po
Zoom.
siya.
Yeah, sometimes the slides repeat over and over again, and
Don't worry, Sir Paulo, this is recorded. So you can, once you're invited, maybe we can.
no, there are other people. I mean,
I know, I know.
uh,
Yes,
my
architect
fellow
Christine.
planners, and I'm talking about planning.
Sorry.
I mean, my fellow planners, Joel Luna, Joel Luna, William T, except for his reclamation, and even June Palafox has some valid points to say, although yes, his
We
agenda
can stop
is.
there, sir. We can stop there.
No. June's a friend of mine,
Just
and
kidding.
he has done a lot for putting planning into the consciousness of people. I will
Yes,
give him that.
exactly.
I will
That's a
give him,
legacy. That's a legacy.
and we have to build on that,
Mhm.
and those of us in the planning profession, wearing my hat as an ENP, need to step up and be more proactive
Yeah.
rather than just be people sitting in the CPDOs or MPDOs. And then engage also the architects and other designers, because a lot of the NPs are lawyers or accountants by background rather than physical planners. So
Mhm.
there's a disconnect between economic planning and physical planning. If you look at all the plans of NEDA, they're wonderful, but it gets lost in translation because there's no
Exactly. Oh
reality.
my God. Oh God. Yes.
The specificity of, sorry to use complicated terms,
Say
the
it.
physiographic reality of the Philippines and the geomorphology is the one that rules us, but our political frameworks and economic planning is based on political boundaries and goals rather than the realities of the ridge to reef or the watersheds and the air sheds.
Mhm.
And we need a radical rethink of everything we're doing right now, because the one reality we have to admit is that we're not doing it right. Why are we behind everyone else in Southeast Asia? It's not because we're doing it right, we're doing it wrong. So we have to question everything.
Okay.
That's my last word.
And you have it reminded me of my conversation with Buck about questioning yourself and admitting to yourself that you did it wrong. You did it bad.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to
I
admit
think
the
that this
things that you
is,
did in design. I have to admit things that I did I don't want to go back to because they were
oh
really wrong.
yes. I think that's one takeaway to all especially the young designers, just like me and my co-founders, my colleagues, especially the students, my past students who are watching right now. That's really one, value that you need to really practice: self-evaluation, crucial self-evaluation, and really admitting to yourself that right now you suck. Anything you want to add? I'm quoting Baxia, by the way. I'm quoting Baxia. Yes.
I
So,
think also, Nana,
yes, Christine.
I think also really this culture of a discourse, right, which I find is a bit lacking. We are very quick to offer our opinions, but
Eh,
not really quick to listen.
eh,
Yeah, but offering what we think, but it's a two-way round, right? There should be a discourse, more discourse, really of exchange of ideas,
exactly.
critiquing without getting defensive, and really
Exactly.
open your designs to critique, to feedbacks. It's the culture of exchanging ideas. I think that we really have to encourage.
Yes. That's a very good thing that you mentioned that, because and Paula's been mentioning quite a few times in his while ago about the academia being a huge part of it. And being an educator myself, I really instill the value of critiquing, because there is a huge difference between critiquing and criticism. Filipinos, and I think mostly Asians, do not understand this. I mean, my God, hindi naman nang sasabihin kang pangit yung gawa mo or walang, it's not like that. So I think this is one thing. And to tell you, this is one thing that Design Davao Society is really going for. God, people, see, I told you, Paolo, this is a triggering point for me. I'm moderating myself right now.
Yeah.
I'm doing
I
a very difficult job.
I never say a design is ugly. I just say it's aesthetically challenged. So there's a way of saying
There's a way of saying, but the point is,
criticizing.
the point is we have to move forward. That very emotional, very insecure part of our egos na pag nasabihan lang, tinanong ka lang, oh, why is the design like that? Galit ka na agad. Bakit ganyan? I mean, for me,
Yeah.
if people ask me why, it's an opportunity for me to explain further and to also like elaborate and learn from the person critiquing me, especially if the person is actually using the space. I mean,
Yes, yes. Otherwise,
nagagalit.
you're designing for yourself. I mean, you have to
Exactly.
you have to leave your ego by the door. Unfortunately, a lot of designers, their ego is 3 times the size of the largest building they ever designed. Sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, it's true. That's why thank you, Christine, for bringing that up. I mean, we actually, this is why when I was briefing you a while ago, during before we allow the participants, that I really wanted this talk to be as authentic and to be as free flowing, because you know, I don't want it. I don't want it scripted. I didn't even know the outline of Paulo's talk. I want to be surprised. That's Buck, I hate you.
But
Why are you showing your
Yeah, I'm
bottle?
going. I'm going down
God,
later and pour myself a.
oh God, we are
Eh,
still on a liquor ban here, so I can't
Yeah,
do that.
I've got a good Cabernet downstairs. I want to.
Oh my God, they are. Why? You're,
Oh,
you're muted. Thank God she's muted.
Back toast to you, back.
So anyway,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. We
So
should
before
talk about Cebu next.
yes. Oh my God. Okay, another question for our participants. Do you want a part two of this talk?
Part two,
Say
Cebu.
yes. Part two, Cebu.
Hey, I'm Cebuano by birth, so
yeah, yeah.
Oh wow, oh
I'm
wow.
from
So you
Argao.
do understand some of Bisaya.
I understand everything. I just don't speak it.
Ah, okay,
Dugay,
maayo,
dugay na
maayo.
sa Manila. I mean,
Dili, black back, dili pwede malibak.
and you cannot sell me in the market.
Okay, sige. I did promise one segment. Instead of having it more parang extensive reaction or suggestion, we will do a la boy abunda fast talk. Okay,
Fire
are
starter,
you
fire
ready?
starter.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Exactly what is it?
I have no
Are you
idea.
are you sure that's water you're drinking?
Yeah, it's water, no. But I'd like to hear if I'm invited to the next one
You are. You
from
are invited.
from Carla, because Canadian urbanism is a very interesting animal,
Kai, Kai.
and
Unmute.
the differences between Toronto urbanism versus Calgary versus Vancouver, and Vancouverism is a known thing studied and much ridiculed, but it's if you have to be a student of urbanism to really get interested and see the differences between
Exactly.
Northern Canadian urbanism, which is
Enlighten
related,
us,
yeah, which
Kai.
is also related to governance, by the way, because metro
Mhm.
governance in Canadian model is different. So when you think about it, it's all interrelated. And when I was a younger designer, all you focus on is your field. Although my background is architecture, I specialize in landscape architecture, and all I thought about at the start was just my field. That then you realize as you get older, everything's so connected that for you to improve yourself, you must reach out and learn what other people do,
Exactly.
understand what makes the world go around, for
Yeah,
you to have any hope of helping change things.
yeah,
Otherwise, what you do is based on just your own limited worldview and understanding. So
Yeah.
governance, I find that governance is really something that
yeah,
shapes cities and physically as well as socially. So
yeah,
the economy and governance is really something. And the Canadian model versus the American models for cities are for students of urbanism. So
sure.
when you apply it to Commonwealth countries versus American-based models, which is the Philippines, that's why you can't have the transference that you want with Hong Kong and Singapore models,
Yeah,
because it's Commonwealth.
let me just interrupt that, Sir Paulo, before I turn over to Carla. Because when you mentioned that, it's very not even against, but in comparison with American cities, like we are modeled after. Like it's very obvious. Like even when you go to Hong Kong, that you see that the British influence, the it's so different. Like
Yeah, they drive on the
and
other side. They drive on the wrong side.
I know, and I think that what you just said actually resonates much with Carla because 5 years in architecture profession. So Kai, enlighten us.
Oh, sorry. Also, I think it's very interesting, Sir Paolo, what you said about like planners or urbanists should be more inclined towards learning about economy. Because the very first thing they told us when in planning school, the very first thing they told us is that urban planners are the hub of the wheel, meaning we're in the middle, and then we basically have to have knowledge on the economy, on politics, on architecture, on engineering for some reason. So yeah, we're like in the middle, like we coordinate everything. So it's like a really big how do you say it? I guess it's like a more macro thing. So yeah, it's very interesting you said that.
Yeah.
I have a little bit to share because it was so interesting when I took the design thinking course at MIT. So I went there under the design umbrella, right? But when I was with there, I was so interesting because my classmates were actually an astronaut. An astronaut, and we had a lot of from the business world, from McKinsey and all this economics background, and we also had a lot from engineers. We also have NASA engineers with us. So the goal really is, I think, one of the sad inventions of the 21st century is specialization, actually, because we are so focused on our specialization that we forget to see the connectivity of all, like in the old times, how Leonardo, Michelangelo, they're actually doctors who operate at night. So that's how they get to draw very detailed parts of the human body. So they're doctors, they're actually merchants, they're under just really learning everything all in one. So this is something that really helps urban designer because you try to look at it from different angles, but then your specialty is transforming all those ideas into a physical form and how to translate that everything, right? Because when I was there, so I was grouped with an astronaut, I was grouped with a McKinsey guy, I was grouped from a NASA engineer. So they had so many grand designs, but at the end of the day, we had to make a city. So suddenly, at the end of the portion of the project, it all fell to me because I was the only one who could translate it into a physical form. So like, they wrote so many ideas on the word. I'm like, how to translate all that into physical form? So
I don't think you should be surprised, Christine, that there was a NASA and a guy and an astronaut, because we deal with the same thing, space.
Yes.
Anyway, sige, let's go to our last segment. I will share my screen again for that. There. So this is here. Okay, there. So Paulo actually showed us his parang render or suggestion. So this is just like parang, give us your reactions of this. This is the Bangkeruhan or the Bangkeruhan River or Davao River. This was taken in 2014. So yeah, what can you tell us about this? What developments you think, what reactions? Quick lang. To Paulo first.
Well, I see a lot of informals.
Mm-hmm. Left and
And
right.
I see, yes, and I see a lot of potential for the riverfront. And like Manila, it could do with a few more bridges, but those bridges could just be pedestrian or bike bridges. Because if you live on one side of the bank, you take that ferry, or you have to go all the way across to the other side. But that's what I see. So the informals can be rehoused on site with better housing.
On site, and not even relocated.
No, and relocation never works because the
Yeah,
jobs
I
are
hate that
here.
too.
That lesson we should have learned 60 years ago.
Oh my God, yes.
And the easement of the river has a lot of potential because it's necessary. If you get the easement back, which in cities is a minimum of 5 meters, then you can also put septic. You can put STPs underneath because all of the outflows from the tanks are going to the river. This river is probably dead. So that's one thing you could do with the new easements, aside from making it a linear park, is that you could make it also a linear STP. And for sure, there are very good, well-established communities in all of those dwellings that you see. It's just that
Yes.
basic utilities of waters, powers, septage is not there. So that's the challenge for retrofitting districts like this into something more humane, is bringing in the infrastructure to provide for all of those people who live in the area. So it's a challenge and this is a problem everywhere in all of our cities, is how to do urban redevelopment, but without the trauma of relocation, which Singapore actually did in the central area. When they raised the shop houses, they built as HDB flats in those areas themselves. So it's only the future generations that had to go to the heartlands of Singapore. The same is true with Hong Kong when they did their emergency housing in the 1950s and 60s because of the refugee situation from communist China, and their strategy was to rehouse everyone in 10 to 12 story flats without elevators. And similarly in Singapore, it was the elevator that was the most costly. So they put elevators, but it only stopped every 5 stories. So you walked up or down 2 stories. There are ways of providing affordable housing for everyone in cities by being creative. This is architecture, not just planning. So there's tons of lessons to learn from the housing programs of both Hong Kong and Singapore, which can be applied to Philippine cities because of the densities involved. And we haven't done so. Okay. We've always given it up to the default of moving them 60 kilometers away into peri-urban areas there's no connection. That's it for me.
Thank you. I just like to echo with what you said about. I really love that you emphasize on developing the informal housing and not removing them, and really adapt the design for the river with them. And it's true. They're very interesting neighborhoods here. I was able to I was able to walk around this area, and it was so interesting. I have tons of pictures. They're so ingenious Filipino Davaoeño character inside that neighborhood. And you're right, it's just a matter of really like ensuring good quality of water and sanitation and so on and so forth. And I think it's possible. I think it can be done. Next question for, do you have anything to add, other reactors? Because I'm gonna go to the next slide. Next, all right. It's not moving. There. For Buck, okay? This is Chinatown. This is the other end, and this is the other end of the 1 kilometer stretch.
Okay, Chinatown, Davao, Chinatown. The identity was founded by the people. It should be designed for the people. That's it.
I thought you were gonna do a very long speech.
You
I'm
want
gonna
something
fix
that's quick.
myself. I'm gonna fix myself some liquid. I was hoping
No,
that you're
that's
gonna make a
basically it.
speech.
Chinatown is founded, not any aesthetic of Chinatown is based on a product, a result of what is the environment, what is the activity. The activity, of course, because of just like any Chinatown, I would probably say it should be the same for Davao. There's a lot of commerce and trading because of the Chinese immigrants originating, buying property over, and creating that commerce, that trading viable city that creates that exchange of the economy. That, in that sense, created that culture there, therefore creating this aesthetic. So, in that sense, it is actually the people who really made Chinatown. So we have to be very sensitive for the future of Chinatown to be for the people. What is for the future of Davao? That's it. Oh, Nana's not yet there.
Nana's not yet there, so I'll temporarily take over for her. So for Chinatown, you mentioned that it should really come from the people, and but as we have been discussing that it's a challenge also to get some conversations or like um, like town halls or charrettes going. So I wonder if you know any example in Cebu or any initiatives in Cebu where you have been involved in or are successful in doing that kind of setup.
Well, I can think on a citywide, admittedly, I couldn't say something in terms of Cebu. There are a few examples I can give you with the few second cities that I've been working with Southeast Asian creative cities. So this is a network of Bandung, Penang, Chiang Mai, and Cebu. This was founded years back when we wanted to identify that second cities, and Davao is actually a second city as well. You know, it can actually exemplify and it actually improve as well the whole. I mean, it does not always necessarily mean that it always has to be the capital, but it is a collaboration and a very important network. The whole cities, all of the country. What I'd like to point out, and I'd like to tell you guys as well with Mark, that I can invite a few speakers for your next placemaking. No, and this is very. It was very beautiful, and there's so much authenticity and uniqueness. So what we identified was, and that's something that I would believe is very similar to Davao. The private sector in Cebu is very strong in terms of pushing initiatives, and this is something that Davao should not give up on. I mean, whatever you were doing, we should always follow that one. Okay, so that's the strength of what I see even now in what's happening the past couple of years with a certain current situation. The private sector and the public sector joining together is a very big factor in our success or our management of whatever crisis we have now. So I see that the strong private sector champions that really initiate public aspect. Chiang Mai has a very strong program on crafts. And I think you have that as well, more than Davao, more than Cebu. You have the strong identity.
That's surprising to hear.
You do in terms of the culture that you have.
Yeah, crafts. Hi, I'm back.
So that's something that, you know, if you want to kind of interrelate, that's something that I would say that I would have in terms of Chiang Mai. The beauty of Chiang Mai and Thailand in general is they have the Thailand Creative Design Center, which has really strengthened the design industry. And I'm glad to say that the Design Center of the Philippines is actually putting this step forward. It is actually creating quite a very similar model. And I'm very happy to breaking those barriers of exclusivity and really collaborating with different fields. That's the game changer supposedly that we should be doing. And we are doing, so that's good. The third one is Penang. their high policy on restoration and how they give back to ensure that there's incentives for private properties, since the properties there are private. It's just like any other city. So how they ensure that their heritage is restored through proper incentives, through proper stakeholder meetings, etc. So I really like to invite these guys. They created they call themselves Think City. So it has a public and it has a public company. It's a public sector, but they created this in really to ensure that there is since Georgetown Penang is a UNESCO heritage site. So they really wanted to protect that. Moving forward, not like protecting that there's no more economic viability. So there should be economic, social, cultural viability. The last one is Bandung, which, by the way, the mayor is an architect, and damn, he's doing a great job there with because of his physical planning expertise as well. The beauty of Bandung is very community based, so they're able to engage the community in this empathetic way and to really improve public spaces as well. And I want to invite these two at least. I want to invite them in terms of Bandung probably and Penang, and I really want them to share to you how they created their own city making. And from there, I'm sure we can all learn.
Yay! Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, we will definitely work hard in that area as members of the private sector to really get more people from like LGU and even developers. I think most or some of the people here are connected with developers or working for developers. So we would really like to get your support to invite the key people from development side, because like it or not, they own the property, and they can they have a big say on what to do with those places. So definitely we're looking forward to that.
Thank you for covering, yeah, Mark.
Back to you, Nana.
Yes, thank you. I was fixing my drink. Thank you, Buck. I was listening the entire time. And can we go to the next picture? Or Christine, Carla, do you want to add in to the Kapaulo about the Chinatown? Okay, next here. For Christine. So this is the Buhangin Bahada flyover. I believe you're very familiar with this portion of the city. So I took this photo last May. This is very current. Okay, so this is a very interesting spot for me because there's a culture happening within this small area. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually got this photo because at the top of the other end of the flyover is where I live, and at the other end of the flyover is where I go to school. So for 10 years I've been using this. I've been passing through this flyover even before the days when there was no flyover yet. So as in any case, right, especially we like to use LA as an example where there's lots of flyovers. Every time there is a case of flyover, you always get this space underneath, which is really like a leftover space and left to the users basically on how to deal with it. There's a lot of opportunity here. In Singapore, what they did with all these flyovers are basically connectors. There's a lot of landscaping being done below, but there's something different with how Singapore also do the flyovers. If you notice, most of the flyovers here are split into two. So there's two roads that go like that and doesn't really connect. So I think that's to allow also some light to pass through underneath, because if you build very, very wide flyovers and if you plant underneath, it's very difficult to maintain and grow because of the lack of sunlight, right? So what they do a lot of plantations, landscaping underneath. But it's part of that works because it's part of a network of green spaces. So it's basically a green connector. So they use the space underneath to connect to one park to another. But here in this case, we don't really have a network of parks to connect to. But there's in when I do urban design, like in my projects in Davao, I always look at how people have inherently used the space already. Sometimes when I remember when I pass here, it's actually a shelter for motorists or people riding motorcycles. When suddenly it will rain, they seek shelter underneath that space to put on their jackets, whatnot. And also, Bahada is known to be heavily flooded. We know when there's continuous rain. So there's really an opportunity to create like, I don't know, a dry pond, water retention pond here to actually accommodate some water during flooding. Urban design, like what Paula said earlier, it's not just about beautifying a space. It has to have utilitarian purpose to it. So it could be I just beside this, if you look at the left side of this photo, there's actually already a garden there with some trees. So there's a connector there that can eat up into underneath the space, green it some more. Anytime there's green, introduction of green design, right? It suddenly feels lived on. It feels alive. The space lives more, breathe more livability to it. So just adding more plantings that are indoor specific because it's not really hit by the sun, and a space for the motorists to stop and during rain to be able to rest, and really use the space more for the people. Green space as an extension from the left side, but introduction of water retention pond for flooding, and a space where motorists can seek shelter, and really also it doesn't matter actually that there's some people selling stuff there because they say yeah, but make it more as part of the design, right? Every green space is instantly activated if there's some food. They have
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have they have William White, which is also a famous urban planner, urban designer. No. She said that how do you attract a space to be usable? Just put in food and instantly there's people there. But of course, it's not really more like people to be able to rest and grab something, more like goes to, and just really look at how people already use the space now and use that as a starting point. Yeah, that's
Thank
it.
you. Great, great. Okay, next one is for Carla. So this one is also in Bahada or in JP Laurel Avenue. Why is it moving? Wait. There. Hi. Unmute.
I know this photo. Okay, so is this by the mall?
This is by Cybergate Robinsons. Not exactly a mall, but a call center building. But there's commercial spaces sa baba, and there are restaurants. Yeah.
I think what this photo shows it has the opportunity to put like street furniture maybe. Kasi like the guy resting there, they could have put a bench, diba? Instead of him sleeping on the floor, they could have put a bench or like even maybe like a yeah, just like a bench and yung, oh my god, yung term yung pang ng water fountain, right? Kasi the more we put like furniture on sidewalks, the more we put stuff used, the more the people would be inclined to use sidewalks. So yeah, also at the same time, you can also put like a rain garden maybe. Kasi I can see that it's like a little bit like inclined. So there can be like a rain garden. dual purpose kasi it can collect rainwater at the same time, looks pretty. So yeah.
All right. So this is to note lang, huh? This is a private property, and I just recently had dinner here. Basta, I was reprimanded because I can't park my bike nearby, so it was not a very nice experience. So yeah, this is just like, you know, an example, an opportunity for a quasi development from with the government and the private sectors. So yep. And then last photo, this is a surprise to everyone. Okay, this is currently happening in Davao City. And this is something that I am very curious, and my colleagues here are very curious because, you know, this is, I don't know, Kai, if you remember this place. This is an intersection going to, or not an intersection, but a smaller street going to San Pedro. From Rizal Street to San Pedro, this is the Crooked Road. That's like that mall, I forgot the name. I think Unitop. I don't remember exactly the name. And currently it's still, you know, under construction for such a long time already that it caused a fuzz na may tumutubo ng gulay on the site. Oh yes. So it's very interesting. I want to know the reactions of you guys, like planners and designers. People are, you know, having this supportive comments. So what can you say? Paulo, can you start?
Plant more.
More.
Sayang.
My official street name ba siya yan? Like, is it like an official
it's
street
Crooked
name?
Road. It's Crooked Road.
It's actually called that?
Yeah, it's a very, it's among all the road networks in this area, no, in this like San Pedro area. This one particularly I really like because it's not that wide, and I really think there's an opportunity on this road or this street to be pedestrianized 100%, because they also already have the arcaded walkways. I think if they give power on the arcaded walkways, this street have so much potential rather than like opening it to cars. Kasi if you're familiar with the Magallanes, San Pedro, Rizal, and the grid, there are so many connections. There are so many ways to get into, because San Pedro Street yung sa dulo where the city hall is, where Sangguniang SP building is. So, you know, this can be accessed as a pedestrian street. That's my hope for it. And it's just interesting. So my what I'm curious about is, like, you know, this mentality na people are, it reminds me of the Filipino resilience mentality na hindi natatapos yung construction, tinutubuan na lang ng mga gulay. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Well, there's an aspect of public safety.
Yeah.
Because you don't want stagnant water, you'll breed mosquitoes.
Exactly.
The drainage has to be looked at. It affects the health and safety of people around it. So if I were the city manager, I'd find a way to either pave it or turn it into a park corridor. Yes, you could pedestrianize it. There must be some reason why they haven't done it. Maybe political.
Funding.
Yeah, well, or these people didn't vote for whoever's in power, something like that. Which happens in Singapore, by the way. They don't put the MRT stations in districts that didn't vote for the powers that be. But yes, I think from a point of view of governance, the aspect of safety is primary, because you don't want stagnant water, you don't want vectors of disease, and if it's not going to be paved at all, then pedestrianize it or put rain gardens and actually grow more vegetables.
All right.
In
Yes,
regards
Kai.
to safety, it's not just also about like the flooding, but at the same time, like for lack of better term, I'm so sorry, pero what if you get stabbed? You know, like it's not a very, it doesn't look very safe. So I think kung if we apply like one of Jane Jacobs' philosophies, I guess, we can use the eyes on the street. So if we open up the windows, if you open up the street fronts to the road, I feel like it would feel more safe, right?
Yeah,
Instead of like boarding up the walls.
and there's no reason to keep it this way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kai, I'm also a Jane Jacobs fan. So it's like basically she's saying that there's a difference between safety and security. Somewhat our cities here, our neighborhoods here are more very like obsessed with security. And that's not
Yeah.
necessarily safe because if you close down your neighborhood, you're not visible anymore. And so yeah, that's it. So actually the reason that I chose all these photos for the supposed quick reaction is this is something that I wanted to build on for the next topic of our future talks. So is it something that might excite you? And shout out to Architect Jim Palma. Sabi niya, Kai, hello daw. Bakit ka nagpapakita ng mga drinks? Nauuhaw na din siya.
Oh, hi, Sir Jim.
Anyway, so
Anyway.
here's my let's wrap it up. I know it's late. Thank you so much again for our speakers, or Paulo, to our reactors, Carla for waking up and drinking with us and making me fix my own drink too. Buck, thank you for making time. I really convinced him he's very busy right now, most especially. And of course, Architect Christine in Singapore, thank you so much for making time. My last or my concluding question is to all of us, to all of you, especially probably to architect Paul, to urban designer, architect, landscape architect, awesome person Paulo Alcazarin. Is there hope?
Of
Can
course,
we
there's
really?
hope.
I mean, there's more to that question. You know that is it still possible that we move past the
Yes,
6 pillars of yes?
I believe in the capacity of the Filipino, especially Filipino designers, to help find solutions and contribute to our society's progress. I mean, to quote Oscar Wilde, we may all be in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.
Wow, that is so inspiring. Buck, are you still there? Any closing line? Okay, I think that's it. Again, thank you so
say that
yes.
we end. Stop. I'm kidding. Nana, go ahead.
I purposely asked that question because we're so, at least me, my core group, my co-founders in Design Davao Society, the people who are still here at this hour, and it's a very good and it's very reassuring to hear that there's hope. We're not crazy. Maybe we are crazy, but maybe we can really do something great out of this crazy. And I really like how the Stoics say it, like, obstacle is the way. Thank you so much, guys, for joining
Thank you.
us this evening.